Hello everyone. This week we're taking a look at some similarities and differences between Aristotle and Confucius as far as virtue ethics are concerned. Now, virtue ethics is one of my favorite type of ethics because I really enjoy cultivating and developing my own personality and the characteristics of moral excellence. And I think that it's easy for us to make a connection with the virtue ethics theory, whereas some of the earlier theories we took a look at, consequentialism, non-consequentialism, got a little bit confusing. But I think that virtue ethics is something that everybody can identify with, in that we're constantly trying to figure out how to work towards our own perfection and cultivate our own sense of self and characteristics. Now, some differences and similarities that I wanted to point out between Aristotle's ideas and Confucius are numerous. Confucius actually came before Aristotle, and I know some people get that confused. But Confucius's virtue ethics theory is a little bit older, and it comes from a different culture. You'll notice in my notes that I pointed out that Aristotle takes on more of a Western perspective, the one that we're probably more familiar with, and that Confucius takes more of an Eastern look. Now, what that means is that Aristotle is more focused on the individual, whereas Confucius is more focused on the sense of community, and we see that as he outlines the 5 cardinal virtues. So virtue in and of itself is this quality of moral excellence that we're attempting to develop within ourselves. And this can really take an entire lifetime. For example, patience is usually one of the virtues that people attempt to develop. And that's something that can take a lifetime. We have to practice patience every day. We get frustrated, we get angry, sometimes with our children or our friends or family members. We don't act very patiently. So it's definitely something that we can work towards every day as far as cultivating ourselves. Another thing about virtue ethics is that it doesn't focus on acts or consequences. It really just focuses on our personality traits. So it's not the act or the consequence that's important here. And something to think about is, as we're developing these virtues, if we're cultivating a morally excellent character, does that mean that automatically we are going to choose to do the virtuous thing or choose to do an act that is more moral? So that's just something to think about. Aristotle talked about virtue as being the mean between 2 extremes. Now, something important to think about there is that he meant this to be relative. So he gives there's an example in the textbook about food. And he says that some people need to eat a lot of food and some people need to eat a little bit of food. And that's relative to the individual. A 400-pound person is going to need more food than a 100-pound person. So when you're thinking about the mean between the 2 extremes, you really need to take a look at yourself and what this means for you. Confucius, on the other hand, his virtue ethics was more related to community. So here we're stepping away from the self and we are focusing on our relationships with other people. Now, because of the time frame historically, and you'll note that I did post a bit on Confucius and his response to women, this is more of a patriarchal situation, or we should view this in terms of the culture and the times. The 5 cardinal virtues that he examines, the ruler and subject and family members, the wife and the husband, or the children and what your relationship is to your community, has mostly to do with patriarchal values, and that would be very different from what we're looking at today. But I think that it can still be useful in that if we kind of overlook the patriarchal system, we can still attempt to cultivate relationships with others in a way that is helpful to us and that brings us a sense of satisfaction. We often find ourselves wanting to help other people, and I think this is where we can apply Confucian virtue theory. Now, both theories are all about self-realization. So this is really an in-depth way to take a look at your own personality and who you are, who you're becoming, and what kind of a legacy or impact you want to leave on this world. So virtue ethics, for this reason, is one of my favorite philosophies to apply. I hope you enjoyed this short session on virtue ethics, and I will see you in the discussion area.